For years, Phil Mickelson was golf's family man. The smile, the fist pumps, the wife on the bag at the Pebble Beach Pro-Am, the Christmas cards that made everyone believe this guy had it all figured out. That was the image we all bought into. But something's been off for a while now. Not the gambling stories. Not the LIV move. Something deeper. Something that doesn't fit the picture we grew up watching. You've noticed it too. The family photos stopped appearing. The smile doesn't reach his eyes anymore. The man who always had time for fans now seems completely isolated. Something broke. And it wasn't the money. It wasn't the tour split. Then came the bombshell. A longtime friend finally spoke. An ex-tour wife broke her silence. And Phil's own camp started fighting back through lawyers instead of press conferences. The truth that came out was darker than anyone expected. But here's what nobody's telling you. The gambling wasn't the worst of it. The scandals weren't what destroyed his marriage. There's a moment. A specific moment. A line that Amy drew that changed everything. Here's my honest take. I've defended Phil for decades. Cheered every major win. Made excuses when others turned their backs. But after reading what actually came out, I genuinely don't know how to feel anymore. What about you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want the real story behind what broke this man, hit subscribe and stay with me. Because the answer isn't gambling or LIV. The answer is sitting in a country club that asked him to leave 3 years ago. 3 years ago, that country club asked Phil to leave. But that wasn't the beginning. It was the result. The real story starts on a specific day that changed everything. June 26, 2026. That's when Scratch Golf dropped a report that didn't just scratch the surface of Phil's problems. It blew the whole thing wide open. The source wasn't an enemy. It was a longtime friend who finally stopped protecting him. Here's the quote that's been rattling the golf world since. Phil does everything for the dopamine, whether it's the way he plays golf, all the gambling, chasing chicks on the road, going to LIV. It's all based on this very deep need to have action at all times. Read that again. Dopamine. Not money, not trophies, not legacy. Dopamine. The chemical that gets released when you chase something that might destroy you. When you take a risk you know you shouldn't. When sitting still feels like death. Think about what that actually means. Every move Phil made that shocked us. Every gamble. Every decision that seemed irrational. It wasn't calculated. It wasn't strategic. It was a man feeding an addiction he couldn't control. And here's what makes this genuinely unsettling. This isn't a new pattern. This isn't something that started with LIV or the gambling scandals. This is who Phil has always been. The people closest to him knew it. They've always known it. The friend didn't speak to hurt him. They spoke because they're scared for him. Because they watched this pattern destroy everything he built, and nobody in his inner circle would stop it. That single word changes everything you thought you knew. But the friend's quote was just the first domino. That first domino fell long before any report came out. Long before the gambling made headlines. Long before LIV. It started with the people who knew Phil best. The ones who stood by him for decades. And one by one, they all walked away. Start with Bones Mackay. 25 years. That's how long Bones carried Phil's bag through every major win. Through every heartbreaking near miss. Through the 2013 Open Championship where Phil played arguably the greatest round of his life. They were more than player and caddy. They were brothers. And now they don't speak. No dramatic public falling out. No press conference. Just silence. The kind of silence that says more than any argument ever could. Think about that. 25 years. Longer than most marriages. And now they don't even say hello when they pass each other. Then there's Billy Walters. If you don't know that name, you need to. Walters was a father figure to Phil. The kind of mentor who could call him out when nobody else would. The kind of relationship that goes beyond golf, beyond business. When Walters got caught up in a 2016 insider trading case, he needed Phil to testify on his behalf. One phone call, one statement. That's all it would have taken. Phil refused. The relationship ended right there. A father figure lost because Phil wouldn't stand up for him. And Gregory Silvera, Phil's stockbroker, the man who handled a $2.75 million gambling debt transfer for Mickelson. Silvera went to prison. Phil faced no charges. Someone else went to prison. Phil walked away. You see the pattern. Phil burns through everyone. Friends, mentors, confidants, people who loved him, people who protected him. And Amy watched all of it happen. She saw what Phil did to Bones. She saw what he did to Walters. She saw what happened to Silvera. Each of these men meant something to him. Each is gone. So what does that leave for the woman who stayed the longest? Amy, the woman who stood by Phil through cancer, through gambling rumors, through every scandal that came their way. She was the rock, the one who never wavered, until she did. The moment came in 2021, and it wasn't a dramatic confrontation. It wasn't a public scene. It was quiet, calculated, and devastating. Amy didn't just ask Phil to leave the Madison Club. She made their wealth management firm call the club directly. Phil is leaving. Now. Not a request. A demand. She didn't even handle it herself because she was done handling him. Think about what that means. Your own wife has to step in and tell your country club to remove you because you've embarrassed the family so badly that staying is no longer an option. That would have been enough to destroy most people's reputations, but what came before it makes everything else look minor. Here's the detail that should stop you cold. Phil had a system, a method. When he wanted to hide where he was going, he would hand his phone to a young employee at the club, pay him $500, and that employee would drive around the course for 3 or 4 hours with Phil's phone in the cart. Why? Because Amy was tracking his location. She would look at her phone, see Phil's dot moving around the golf course, and think he was playing. The whole time, Phil was somewhere else, doing things he knew she would never approve of. The employee would get paid, the phone would keep moving, and Phil would get his time. It wasn't one affair. It wasn't one mistake. It was systematic deception, planning, lies that required other people to execute. A network of silence that Amy eventually uncovered, and when she found the truth on his phone, everything changed. She found the truth on his phone, and what she did next changed the geography of their entire marriage. Change the geography is one way to put it, but what happened next wasn't just about where Phil lived. It was about who else was ready to speak. Because the Madison Club wasn't the only place where Phil's behavior had been quietly buried. In 2015, a woman named Ashley Perez was married to PGA Tour player Pat Perez. They were in the same circles. They stayed in the same houses during tournaments. And one night, at a Barclays Championship event, Phil Mickelson did something that would stay buried for years. Ashley says Phil showed her an explicit photo of himself. Then he made an unwanted advance. Her words are worth repeating. There is a culture of silence that keeps women from coming forward. That line alone should stop you cold. Because what she's describing isn't just one incident. It's a system. A system where powerful men are protected. Where witnesses look the other way. Where victims know that speaking up means destroying their own lives while the men walk away. Days after her initial statement, Ashley posted again. She said she would rise up and stand next to the millions of women who have been silenced. She wasn't some random person making accusations. She was married to a tour player. She knew the culture. She lived it. And she's saying that culture protected Phil at her expense. Here's the part that should hit you hardest. This is who Phil was when nobody was watching. The man who smiled for cameras. The man who signed autographs. The man who was supposed to be golf's family man. And Amy knew this side existed. She had seen glimpses. She had heard whispers. She had tracked his phone and found nothing but lies. Ashley broke the silence. But she wasn't alone. And the stories she told led straight back to Amy's front door. Amy's front door. That's where all of this was heading. The rumors, the phone tracking, the club removal, the culture of silence. And when the report dropped, everyone expected Phil to fight back, to defend himself, to stand behind a microphone and say none of it was true. That's not what happened. Through his lawyer, a spokesperson released a statement. Some of the allegations circulating about Mr. Mickelson are false. Others revisit mistakes he has already acknowledged publicly or privately. Then this part, stacking the disputed claims next to the ones he has owned, does not make them credible. Notice what they didn't say. They didn't deny everything. They said some allegations are false. Others revisit acknowledged mistakes. That phrasing tells you everything you need to know. There are mistakes, plural, multiple, and some of them have been privately acknowledged. Read that again. Privately acknowledged. That means Phil has admitted things behind closed doors. Things he never told the public. Things his wife already knew. He's not denying the pattern. He's not denying the behavior. He's just saying some of the specific details are wrong. But here's the part that should make you think twice. If these allegations are so easily dismissed, why hasn't Phil defended himself publicly? Why has he gone completely quiet? Why is his lawyer speaking through statements instead of Phil standing behind a microphone and saying none of this is real? In the court of public opinion, silence is rarely a winning strategy. And Phil has been silent for months. Not because he's protecting his family, not because he's been advised not to speak, because he knows that defending himself would only bring more scrutiny to the things he can't deny. He admitted some things, but the one he refused to admit, that's exactly what Amy had already discovered on her own. Amy found the truth. The phone logs, the tracking, the patterns, but here's where the story takes a turn that nobody saw coming. Because right when you're ready to write Phil off completely, something happened that complicates everything. Earlier this year, Phil missed the start of the LIV season. Then he withdrew from the Masters. The official reason was vague. Family health matter. That's all they said. The kind of statement designed to give someone privacy when they're going through something terrible. But then details started to emerge, and what we learned changes everything. It wasn't Phil who was unwell. It wasn't Amy. It was one of their children. Let that land for a moment. Phil Mickelson, the man who has been publicly humiliated, accused of inappropriate behavior, exiled from the sport he once dominated, watching his reputation crumble in real time. He missed the Masters because one of his children was sick, and he hasn't spoken publicly about it since. That's not spin. That's not PR. That's a father protecting his child while the world tears him apart. The contrast is devastating. On one side, you have the allegations, the gambling, the inappropriate behavior, the broken relationships. On the other side, you have a father who pulled out of the Masters, one of the most important tournaments in the world, because his child needed him. Which version is the real Phil? Maybe both. Maybe that's what makes this so heartbreaking. The same man who made terrible choices is also the man who would drop everything for his family. The same man who destroyed relationships is also the man whose family is circling the wagons to protect him. The human mind can hold both truths. The heart struggles with it. And here's the thing that should make you sit back and think. Phil hasn't spoken about any of this. Not the report, not the allegations, not the family health crisis, nothing. He's gone completely quiet. And the people who used to defend him, they're not speaking either. A father missing the Masters for his child. It humanizes him right when you're ready to walk away. But does it save him? Does it save him? The golf world has already answered that question. Not with a dramatic public condemnation, not with a press conference, with something quieter, and in some ways, sadder. Sponsors won't renew. Deals will quietly lapse. The PGA Tour re-entry pathway that was supposedly open to LIV defectors, it appears to be closing for Phil specifically. Not through an official ban, through silence, through inaction, through the quiet understanding that his time has passed. No final press conference, no dramatic exit, just a gradual fade. A quiet disappearance from the sport he once dominated. Friends who used to defend him aren't speaking up anymore. His defenders have gone quiet. His inner circle has become smaller and smaller. The people who know him best are either staying silent or speaking to reporters instead of cameras. And Phil himself, he's gone quieter than ever before. No public defenses, no heartfelt apologies, no tearful interviews, just silence and the occasional lawyer statement. This is what a slow-motion exile looks like. No dramatic exit, no final press conference, just a gradual fade. The sponsors will let their contracts expire without renewal. The endorsements will dry up. The invites to events will stop coming. Not because anyone officially banned him, because it's easier to just let him fade away. Because nobody wants to be the one who officially closes the door on a legend. And maybe that's the most heartbreaking part of all. Not the scandals, not the allegations, not the gambling, but the loneliness of it. The isolation, the realization that the people who used to love him, who used to defend him, who used to be in his corner, they're all gone now. He's surrounded by people, sure. But how many of them are actually friends? How many would stand up for him when it matters? Through all of this, Amy's position has been clear. Through a spokesperson, she has shown him unwavering love and remarkable grace. But unwavering doesn't mean unconditional. Unwavering love. But unwavering doesn't mean unconditional. So where does that leave Phil today? Where does that leave Phil today? Alone. Not in the physical sense. There are still people around him, but the ones who matter, the ones who knew him before the fame, before the money, before the scandals, they're gone. And the one person who stayed through everything, the one who stood by him through cancer and gambling rumors and public humiliation, she's the one who finally drew the line. Amy didn't just walk away from Phil, she walked away from the life they built together. The clubs, the social circles, the image she had to maintain while knowing the truth, the lies she had to swallow because speaking up meant destroying everything. She didn't leave him entirely, but she set a boundary, a clear one. You can't live like this anymore. You can't be this person and still have me by your side. That's what walking away really means. Not divorce papers, not a public announcement. It's quieter than that. A woman protecting herself while still loving a man she knows is broken. So here's the question that's been hanging over this entire story. Do you separate the man from the golfer? Do you remember the fist pumps, the major wins, the magic he created on the course? Or do you see the pattern of destruction, the burned bridges, the people who loved him and walked away? I grew up cheering for Phil. Now I genuinely don't know. Do you separate the man from the golfer? I'll tell you my answer right after you tell me yours. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and if this conversation hit home, hit subscribe. We're not done talking about the real stories in golf. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.